We are now.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. I realize it's short notice. We got to be we all have to be nimble at this point on the issue of the 1099s. I realize many of you are just getting up to speed as we are on what is going on. And I realize that may handicap you a little bit in what at this point you can report to the committee, but I appreciate you being here. Legislature has a responsibility to do some due diligence and stay on top of this issue. Plus, as I wrote the deputy secretary, we may have some things to offer you from what we're hearing from our constituents as issues. We've already made some suggestions that we appreciate on the website that the department very promptly accepted. I think they were helpful in terms of letting people navigate the webpage. So I want to welcome, I'll start with Brittany, because that's who I've had communications with. And as I read the press release, you're the person in charge. So why don't you, Brittany, just sort of bring us up to speed organizationally as to what you're doing and where you are, and we'll take it from there.
All right, and Commissioner, please feel free to chime in if I miss anything from the VDOL side. As you read in the press release, there are a few of us that have come over to help support and oversee the response and recovery to the 1099 incident. VDOL already had 3 tactical teams set up and 3 work streams already moving. The recapture process, the reissuance of the new 1099s, and the ID theft, PII identification process. So those of us on the task force have integrated into those teams. They really did have pretty good processes and plans in place. And I think what we were able to do yesterday is work within those constructs they had and add our additional thoughts and help bring some cohesiveness kind of to the plan. So, we've mapped out, I'm looking at a whiteboard, so I apologize if it looks like I'm staring at the wall, but we've mapped out these 3 separate work streams, step-by-step processes. We've identified where communications are important in each of these steps, where we've added additional quality control checks in each of these steps. And so it's really helpful to have this plan and recovery mapped out in a place that, the entire team has reviewed, seen, and everybody understands where we're going, what their roles are, and who's the team lead in each of those areas. So it's really quite, it's methodical. It's not, the issue itself is bad, right? But in terms of how we respond and recover is very much a methodical, step-by-step process, adding quality control into the processes. And so I think the first day here has been a big accomplishment. We're on 2nd day now. By the way, this is not my house. I'm in VDOL. These are not my curtains.
Full disclaimer, right?
Just to be clear. There's been a ton of information we've been able to uncover and talk about. It's been very helpful, I think, for us, but also VDOL and everybody involved in the process. Our agency partners have been pulled in at various levels, and I can talk a little bit more about that. In terms of quality control, which I think is really kind of the key to our response and recovery, we've been able to identify the error, where it happened, and how it occurred. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that because I don't want to start casting blame or get into nitty-gritty how the data was jumbled. The important piece is that we've added 3 significant steps to the quality control process. So there's going to be electronic verifications done by ADS and the tax department. So the data and the lists that we're using for the 1099s are going through electronic verifications and as well a manual verification by VDOL staff. So they're physically looking at documentations and double checking it against the records. And those are happening at a couple of different points throughout the process. There's also an additional step of quality control once the 1099s have been printed. And so we've had a conversation with BGS about integrating some staff on site to review those printed 1099s before they go out in the mail. So another step afterwards to ensure again that there was nothing missed or nothing wrong. In addition to that, to those extra efforts in quality control, the commissioner had a great idea this morning in terms of, needing and the team's desire to have a quality assurance, quality control expert. So we have a couple of those in state government. And I believe the commissioner was going to reach out to HR to see if we could identify an individual that could come look at these quality control steps that we've identified and make sure that they're the right ones, make sure they're as robust as they can be, maybe identify other things. We're not quality control experts. This seems like the right thing to do, but we would just want to verify and check again. So Commissioner, is there any sort of update to that conversation that you've had with HR that you want to provide, or?
Not at this time. I think we've identified a couple different possible departments or agencies that do regular quality assurance and quality control. I think as Brittany mentioned, our job is to make sure we move these process steps forward. I don't think it hurts to have someone who's outside the minutia of the response, just giving us taking a very full process view and making sure that our quality assurance and quality control measures are in place and what the results of those quality control measures are. Are we taking the appropriate sample size when we review? Is it at the right intervals? Are we documenting and how are we documenting so that we can also be fully transparent with the state auditor's office when they conduct their performance review? So I think, we're from that perspective, just wanting to make sure we've crossed every T and dotted every I, not only from ensuring that the information is going out, but that we are tracking that as well, so we can comply and support the efforts of the auditor's office.
So there's the 3 work streams that I mentioned, and I know you've heard the commissioner already talk about these. And there are meetings that are happening every morning and afternoon to share updates. So the whole team in the morning and at the end of the day has all the same information. Tasks that have been accomplished and identified are documented. We have priorities set for the day. We have priorities set for the next day. And so I think that helps not only make sure that our separate tasks are not siloed and that there's, all these pieces kind of overlap at one point or another as well. So it's important to make sure that our work streams are coordinated. We're making really good progress in all 3 streams. I think some important highlights to mention for you all, the recapture process. We are looking to have envelopes out to claimants to send their 1099s back by the middle of the week. The ID protection, identity theft.
Can we stop and
I see you, Senator.
Yep, sorry.
Let her finish the sentence and then
Okay.
I'll call on you.
Oh, that's okay. I'll stop there because that's kind of one work stream. If you
Okay.
had a question about recapture, I'm happy to stop there.
Okay,
Well, I
Stephanie?
just want us to be really specific. 1099Gs, all 1099s, like the more specific we are in our language, it's really helpful because that's a lot of the questions we're getting. Am I
Yeah.
affected? Who do I like? So I need
Right.
people to be specific.
That is a fabulous point. 1099 genes from the Department of Labor. And I think we've had a couple of conversations with some of our media partners about being specific. I think it's been reported a couple of times, generally 1099s. And our communications are very specific. And we even asked the tax department, I reviewed their letter that they sent out that notes our 1099s, meaning tax department 1099s, are okay. If you're reading stuff, if you're hearing stuff about bad 1099s, it's specific to Department of Labor. So we're saying the same thing over here at VDOL 1099Gs. So very good point. Thank you. I should be consistent in this testimony too, just in case anybody's watching. I don't want them to be confused.
So can I, before we get into some of the specifics of return and things like that, I just want to, I think I probably know the answer to this question, but should we be looking at this as there were like 6 or 7 people mentioned in the release? Are you viewing this as you folks are supportive of the lead of the commissioner, or are you in the lead and the commissioner is working collaboratively with you? Who's in charge of cleaning this up at this point?
Well, the commissioner is obviously in charge of the department, but I think the governor's asked me to be in charge of the tactical teams, which are providing support and oversight to the department. I think at the end of the day, there hasn't been any area where the commissioner and I have had to, we haven't disagreed on kind of the ultimate outcome. So nobody's had to insert their authority over another in this case.
Right. Okay, good. Okay. In terms of the returns which you're getting into, I've expressed this before, that I'm concerned that it may bring more confusion and it may be a necessary evil to recipients, to have to take an affirmative step here. And there obviously will be probably spotty compliance. And the commissioner has said, even if there is spotty compliance, however spotty it is, that's helpful in making sure it doesn't get into other people's hands. Have you looked at that issue, or whether there's another way other than asking people to return something at this point? Just seems like
Yeah, we
another
talked
in the process.
Yeah, we talked about a couple of different scenarios. We talked about, whether there's guidance to destroy, whether there's guidance to send it back. I think at the end of the day, what I find the most valuable in terms of collecting it back is that we can, we'll be able to track it at some point. That's going to be a monumental, time-consuming task that I'm, thinking about in the back of my mind. How and who do we do this? But we have some fairly specific numbers of each of these programs. These mailings went out in separate batches, right? So if we collect those back and we know the 2 batches that have the errors and we're able to collect a number back, we can really kind of narrow down the population that may be most affected. And so there's some value in having that data from my standpoint. But it's not perfect. I don't think any of the scenarios are perfect, quite frankly, in terms of collecting them. So in my mind, this is the best path of non-perfect scenarios.
I would also add, Mr. Chair, if I can, We know people are going to mail them back on their own. They already have. We know people are going to destroy them on their own. I think the department shouldn't be in a position of encouraging people to destroy them on their own, because then we can't certify that we received them back and they were destroyed appropriately. So I think from our standpoint, we are also doing what was recommended to us in our conversations with the Attorney General's office, that we need to provide a mechanism to safely receive them back, so we can ensure that at least those that we receive are destroyed properly.
One issue that I want to get to, make sure we get to today, is the future services. I think it's path 3 that you were referring to, or task 3, which is to give Vermonters who may have been touched by this some added support and services and prevention services to make sure their IDs are not compromised. My understanding is that paying for that, as of yesterday, people were starting to try and get some better estimates. The original estimate, no one could exactly say where it came from, of $7 million, but that it's been favorably received in the Senate Appropriations Committee. I just want to know whether the governor is committed to putting resources towards that, hiring commercial firms or somebody to give ID protection to people, and what that universe might look like.
Yeah, we have some really good updates in this area. Commissioner, feel free to add in here.
Sure, I think, yeah. So from our response perspective, we are committed to providing protection to folks who were impacted by this. We know what that population looks like. And I think we are at this point simply exploring what options may be covered under the state's insurance policy versus what we would need additional funding for. There's a lot of opportunities out there for different companies that do this type of work. So we are also in talks with multiple vendors to make sure that we have one that is reputable and falls under the contracting and procurement, as well as the insurance protection that the state has. So I think the $7 million is a high side, and we are very hopeful that we can come in under that. When we talk about protection, we're talking about complete identity theft protection over a term or period of time. And there are many full service firms out there that can provide everything from call center support services to direct mailings to claimants to easy enrollment at no charge to the claimant or individual. So I think we're on the right path there and moving in the right direction. Is just we need to determine which vendor and which will be covered or not covered under the state's insurance policy.
So again, with the idea of helping out here as best the legislature can, it sounds like you're committed to it. If it requires an appropriation, you're going to ask for that appropriation. Other than reading things in Digger and maybe on the website, I mean, I guess one recommendation that I would have is that the population out there, I think, would derive a lot of comfort in listening to this conversation, that they're going to have those services available to them. But I wouldn't want them to learn that 10 days from now. They should know almost immediately that the legislature and the executive is going to step up. We're fixing this problem, and we're going to pay for services that help prevent any further distribution of these numbers or hurt people's credit ratings or loan possibilities. And so I would encourage those kinds of messages to go out. And I may sound like a broken record, but I also would like to encourage you, Madam Deputy Secretary and Commissioner, to, in your communications, there's always a balance to how much detail you put in in terms of what legally required, the language you use, people understanding it. And I don't know who it is, but there are people out there who can look at these kinds of things and give another set of eyes other than the executive branch to say, people aren't going to understand this letter. They're going to be confused. I mean, we actually were putting out a letter, and I saw a reference in one of our letters to the Lost Wages Assistance Program, the supplement. No one's going to understand what those programs are when they know whether they're affected. So we have to look at language that goes out to people to give them comfort level.
Yeah.
So I don't know
I
if
think
you.
it's a very valid point. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I strongly believe in clear, concise guidance and not being overly wordy. And we have pulled in a couple of folks to help us. I know we're going to send some language over to the AG's office and make sure that that they've signed off on what we're required legally to put in some of this notification. The claimants received an email. I think if it hasn't already gone out this morning, it will. An update, guidance on what we're asking them to do with the 1099s, the VDOL 1099G forms, and there's a line about the identity theft coverage that they'll be receiving more information about directly. So that'll be mailed to them directly. There's, for obvious reasons, like not publicizing what the details are. And so, and we can talk more about like what we're proposing to do. It's just, when you talk about the length of coverage and specifics, it just gives people an opportunity that if somebody wanted to be nefarious, they would know perhaps when.
So Brittany, is it possible for us to get a copy of that email? And are you emailing all 80,000 of the 1099G recipients? And are you giving them specific, right now, freeze your credit rate, right now to go in and do X, Y, or Z. And so I'd love to know if you're actually making specific recommendations that are easy, clear, understandable. And if we could get a copy of that letter, it would be great so we can see what your communications are.
I was just going to add, so we did put that in the original email that went out. It will go out again, a shortened, abbreviated version today, and we will and plan to send the General Assembly these email distributions and any other, FAQ information that we put together, so you have it at your fingertips. There will be another email that goes out to folks with the frequently asked questions, likely tomorrow. And we are posting all publications, including emails, to the 1099 incident response webpage that we have, so they can always refer back to it there as well.
Thanks.
Can you walk us through what happens right now when someone calls the Department of Labor?
At this point, if someone calls the Department of Labor, our teams, both here at the department and in the call center, have been given talking points. But essentially, someone typically calls and says, what do I do with the 1099 I got? Our instruction to them is hold on to it. You will receive instructions in a self-addressed pre-stamped envelope in the mail, likely sometime next week. And you're instructed to put it in the envelope and return it back to us. You will be mailed likely the number of return envelopes for the number of 1099s you received. So if you receive 4 1099s, you'll receive 4 return envelopes for a variety of reasons. And then if they're worried about their credit or their identity protection and security, we are also informing them that they will be receiving a direct notification from us, both by email and by paper mail, of instructions for how to enroll in identity theft protection. That will also probably come in the next week. But we are also giving them instructions, to Senator Clarkson's point, about things they can do right now that are free to them, like freeze their credit. So they are receiving those instructions as well.
So if people are emailing me and saying they spent the morning on the phone answering different touch tone prompts and never thought that they could talk to somebody. Is that an anomaly? Is the data breach the first thing on the touch tone option right now?
So there's no additional information we can provide people than what we've already done in terms of if they call, they're not going to get specific claim information with regards to this process because we just don't have all those details laid out for folks yet. But they will get how we're responding and what they can expect if they call the Claimant Assistance Center, since those are the people who are impacted by this, likely where they're getting a lot of touchstones or not feeling like they're getting to the right person is if they're calling the main line for the Department of Labor, which is very different than the unemployment insurance claimant assistance.
Can I have that number? Because I will tweet it out right now, but I haven't even seen that number. So I think a lot of people who see a message about a data breach and are waiting for this information don't know there's a claimant assistance line.
Well, I would all just say that these are all individuals in the unemployment insurance program, so they all receive and have complete access to the claimant assistance line and receive it literally every week. So they do have that information. Although, I mean, I think the other piece too that we're trying to balance is there were, probably roughly about 55,000 people impacted by this. If we tell them all to call the claimant assistance line, there are actual claimants who are calling the claimant assistance line, trying to get help with their actual unemployment insurance claim. And so all you're going to do is bog down another phone system with more calls that we can't even provide specific answers to. So we have been reluctant to direct them to the to the UI Claim Center because those people are actually helping people with their unemployment insurance claims. We have talked about creating a new phone number with simply a recorded message, but we do not have capacity to stand up a separate call center with 200 call agents to handle 55,000 phone calls.
Okay, you all, like a UX director would be really helpful right now, like a customer service user experience design person, similar to what the chairman is saying. If they call the Department of Labor right now, do they get information about the data breach? Can you say, click right now this button to go to an FAQ about the data breach? And at the end of that, there's a number they can call if they still have questions.
If they call the Department of Labor, no, because our system is not designed to just throw a recording up on there. It's an antiquated phone tree system. But if they call the claimant assistance line, we are adding recordings to the claimant assistance line. So they are receiving information about 1099s.
But you just told me you don't want them to call the claimant assistance line. If you had a claimant assistance line, they could call that was broadcast everywhere, but directed them differently to different programs right away.
But the problem is I don't have
that number out there.
I don't have a program to direct them to where there's enough agents to answer 55,000 people calling at once.
I'm wondering if we can do this quick enough, perhaps, and I won't put you on the spot, Deputy Secretary Naylor, but if we could set up a line quick enough, and even if it wasn't a live person, but just the recording specific to 1099, nothing else, if we can do that quick enough, meaning like in the next day, we should do it, day or two, maybe even longer, it doesn't matter. I'm just thinking that the recapture letters and envelopes will be out by the middle of next week, and I hope that will the letter itself will provide clarity with instructions on what to do. So we've got to just get through these couple of days, at least in this process, but it could be a line and tool for us to use as we go throughout the process.
I appreciate that. I mean, we're talking to people in their 60s who are losing sleep, who don't know who to talk to or who to call, who were laid off from a very long-term job, that they've had for a long time. They're just trying to do the right thing. And they have no idea who to talk to. That's who's emailing me, saying, I woke up this morning worried somebody else has my identity. We need to help them without waiting for an email, because that might not be the best option for them.
Yeah, we'll take that as a takeaway. Like, Commissioner,
I want to add that we did explore setting up a separate phone line with a recorded message. It was going to take more than a week for us to do that. So that's where we shifted to other options that would be more expeditious. Again, we can look at whether or not there's a different avenue to set up a separate phone line with a recording, but we did go through our vendor and they said it would be 3 to 4 days to even just set the line up, let alone have it, operational. So again, there may be other options, and we can look into that to have something up by early next week. So.
Yeah. I just want to provide a little bit more detail and information on the conversation around identity theft and the efforts going on there. There is a group working on this, and there's a likely vendor in mind that the commissioner spoke about, and we're checking that against a couple of others to make sure that we're not just throwing all of our eggs into one basket. But it would be a vendor that already went through the procurement process in another state. And we're working with risk management, who will ultimately need to sign off on the vendor and the services that they're providing. But we think that there's like a $250,000 deductible, and that risk management and insurance will cover the rest. What we don't know yet is whether or not the policy and the insurance will cover individuals in all of the programs, or if it's going to be the 2 that we know were impacted. So that's some of the details we have to figure out, but just wanted to kind of provide that information to you all. And it's something we're looking at. If insurance does not cover these other populations, there's an assessment of the data being verified and checked again, and then whether or not we cover those individuals and how, meaning what source of funds. So
Is it out of an abundance of caution that you're going beyond these 2 programs, or have you started to discover that there are some errors and mistakes out there among the other UI populations? I mean, if
abundance of
you get to
caution.
the point where it's only these 2 programs, not only could you save money, but you could save a lot of angst among the people who weren't in those programs.
Right. So abundance of caution right now, the verification of these other 3 UI groups are going through an electronic verification with ADS and tax. So that'll help us confirm that those groups were in fact not affected. But it gets a little tricky because some people, the numbers I'm looking at, and I'm looking at a spreadsheet, which I think we plan to share with you all when we finalize these numbers. The numbers I'm looking at are pieces of mail. They're 1099-G forms from Vermont Department of Labor. They're not individual people, and I might fall into all 4 or 5 categories. So that's where it kind of gets tricky in terms of who you cover. But Commissioner, you want to add something?
I was just going to say, I think the population is not, so first of all, we have not received any reports or have any indication that these other 2 programs were impacted. We are validating to make sure, but we have not received any reports at this point that the other 2 programs had any errors in them. The other piece is, because the 2 batches that had errors in them were supplemental benefits, it's likely that the people who are impacted in those 2 batches also exist in these other programs, right? So if they received lost wages assistance benefits and or the Vermont short-term supplemental benefit, it means they belong to either the PUA program or the unemployment insurance program. So, the number I gave you yesterday of about 45,000 people in the program is not likely to grow significantly because they were probably already enrolled in another program as well. So I don't think we're going to find necessarily a lot of new people, but I do think we want to be able to, as Brittany said, provide out of an abundance of caution or just to allay worry from folks to have them have the opportunity to enroll. I think we need to be able to say, yes, you were part of this group, or no, you weren't part of this group. But even if you weren't part of this group, if you're still worried, here's an opportunity to protect yourself. I would also say around the phone number in the call center, Brittany, we haven't really talked about it, but if we are able to select a vendor relatively quickly, every vendor we've looked at so far will stand up its own call center with a script from the state of Vermont, and will allow people to call their call center with information about this data breach and what to do to protect themselves. And they're obviously experts in this field and do this on a regular basis. So even if we can identify the vendor, we may be able to have a call center up within 2 days. So that, I think that's a positive as well.
Time is of the essence, I think, on that point. And I think that would be great.
Agreed.
Yeah, I hope we're not experiencing some of the same things we experienced in the spring or summer in terms of people not getting through or waiting for long times. I think the recording as Senator Rahm was suggesting and we're talking about now is really critical. And even if it takes a few more dollars to get some high on the pecking order of being a new customer, we should get some recorded message up with a directive. I mean, if the message is good, it probably will, filter out 90% of the calls. I'm just picking that number out of air, but only 10% of the people will want to make the follow-up call if they get their questions answered in a recorded message.
I will contact our vendor even just following this conversation, even just to see if we can provide another, instead of a new number, which takes more time, an actual just option. So when they call the Claimant Assistance Center, it usually provides 1 or 2 options. We could simply just add a third option with a recording, and that can happen, I think, actually relatively quickly. Could happen even as early
Great.
as so
Great.
I'll do that when we get off the line.
Brittany, thank you very much. I'm not going to cut you off, but I promised I'd get you out of here in 5 minutes from now. So maybe you can prioritize anything else you'd want to tell us. Well, we're going to probably want to have you back, at least weekly, just for status updates. But it will depend on, what develops. But this has been helpful to us, and I appreciate you coming in and bringing your whole team and what you shared with us thus far. But if you want to wrap up in the next 5 minutes, that would be great. Any other points?
Yeah, I think we touched a lot of the major points that we wanted to make today. I think in terms of coming in and scheduling some time, it would be helpful to us if you wanted to do, check-ins, we could schedule ahead of time and then make sure we've got a lot of teams and processes in place. So I'd love to be able to schedule it into our days.
Right.
And so if we could do that, and that would be helpful to us.
Yeah, we certainly can do that. And all of you don't need to be here. It could just be you or 1 or 2 others if that helps also.
It would.
And I think we're working towards that end. I think we have 2 times to check in next week that we've scheduled, that Nathan's scheduling with you.
Okay, great. I think that if the commissioner and I can just, do those like twice weekly, however many times.
Yeah.
Weekly,
Yep. Tuesday and Friday morning, I think, is what Nathan's working on, but we will more to follow.
Great.
And again, getting at that message on identity theft, which I think more people are, I think, more concerned about identity theft than they are about getting their 1099-G so they can file their taxes. But to get the word out there that there's some services coming their way that will minimize the problem, and it's going to be paid for by the state of Vermont. I think that message will help allay some fears.
I think today there'll be, quite a few points of communication, social media. We're talking about a press release and media, asking the media to help push out, like, here's the guidance. and your point about the identity theft, this information will be coming directly to claimants in the recapture process. So we'll try to push that message out into as many channels as possible.
And I
over
just
the
add,
course
if you could, that message, people who don't speak English very well are very concerned about identity theft. You know, there's so much at stake for them. If you could reach out to AALV and see if they've been hearing concerns about this and which few languages might be really helpful to get that information in.
One other idea I had, it may be a little bit off the wall, but maybe dealing with some of the professional groups like the CPA folks, if they would be willing to, if I don't want to complicate things with the return of stuff, but if you could connect with a lot of these people will have accountants, many of them won't, but people might feel more comfortable if they can turn to one of their professional friends and say, what do I do with this? And even as far as saying, okay, they can just explain to them further what's going on. I bet you accountants would be willing to help out in that regard, and they have in a society, and then that would be another thing that they might be directed to. It's just an idea. Anyhow, so thank you very much. I think it's 10:30 now, and I appreciate making yourself available on such short notice. And you delivered a lot of information. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're rooting for your work.
Thank you.
Committee will take a 10-minute break and we'll be back on housing at 10:40. Thank you.